Hello there, welcome to episode 8 of This Is Lit, a podcast where we'll be talking about all things literature. My name is Emily and joining me today is PreBaker. How are you going, Pre?
Not too bad, Emily. It's term 3, week 9. So, yeah, almost there. Kind of
Nearly made it.
Yeah.
Yep, I feel you. And I'm also joined by Sian Clark. How are you going, Sian?
Hello, I am so good.
Cool.
Yeah, no, I'm dying. It's week 9, term 3, as Miss PreBaker has said, so I am exhausted.
We've nearly made it though. Five and a bit days. And a whole day of parent-teacher interviews, but that's fine. We'll get through.
Can't wait for that moment. I'm so excited.
Anyway, that's enough of us whinging about our lives, which we have chosen and enjoy for the most part.
Yes, true.
I actively choose this.
So this is episode 8, guys, which is going to be our final episode for the season on the longest memory and the 7 stages of grieving. Hopefully you've been listening to a few of our other episodes up until this point. We've tried to talk about the longest memory and the 7 stages of grieving in a fair bit of depth. Whether we accomplished that, I don't actually know.
Surely.
We tried, I guess. That's all we hope for.
Definitely
that's all you
tried.
Ask. Today's episode we're going to be breaking down some essay prompts and discussing how we would answer them. So hopefully that will be useful to anyone who has an essay to write on these 2 texts in the next few months or so. Cool. So starting off with, we have PreBaker's essay prompt, which is: how is resistance portrayed in the longest memory and the 7 stages of grieving, and how is it received?
Emily, would you like to take this over?
Sure.
Start with? We'll chime in, but you start with it.
Yeah. All right.
Quick thing though, just a reminder to all the students that are listening, all 2 of you, make sure, I don't know, I feel like, I was thinking about this as well, make sure that you understand what the question is asking you to do as well by highlighting keywords and key phrases. I've seen plenty of essays fall apart because the student in question didn't understand the words within there. So how is resistance portrayed? That's quite an interesting phrase, because it's not only asking you basically the meaning of resistance, but also it's asking you how is it shown and displayed in the text. And I feel like students, I just feel like, guys, bring your dictionaries to your sack and bring them to your exam, because it will help you so much.
Yeah.
Sorry,
could not agree more.
Yeah, the key word sometimes is even just how, and how important the word how is. Well, how is it portrayed? How do these texts, portray resistance?
And also,
And
also, how is it received? So you can't just pick and choose to answer one half. You've got to try and make sure that you're addressing all parts of the question. Otherwise, you will definitely lose some marks there, which is what you do not want, obviously.
Yeah, there's a 2-parter to this question.
Yeah. My one's a 2-parter too. And then also, I just wanted to let our loyal fan base of listeners know that we teach using the integrated method of TEQL. We don't use the block method. So just in case you're wondering, that's the one that we use because we find it the most effective. You get the most, I believe personally, you kind of open yourself up to get the most amount of marks as well using the integrated method rather than the block method, because it lends itself much easier, although it's harder in learning how to complete it first off. It's much easier in the long run as well.
On that note, can you just explain what the integrated method actually is for anyone who isn't too sure what we're talking about?
Okay. So the integrated method of comparison essays is basically your intro is pretty much your stock standard intro. So you make sure that you discuss each text. You also make sure that you discuss, and guys, correct me if I'm wrong because I'm doing this on the fly. You discuss each text, the spatial settings and the temporal settings of each text as well. And then basically you also make sure that you answer the essay question. But really the biggest thing that we learn when we're using the integrated method is the acronym TEQL. So T stands for obviously topic sentence, and then you have your first E, which is your evidence from your first text. So it can be, I get this question a lot as well. It can be longest memory or 7 stages of grieving. It doesn't matter, but just make sure that you are
consistent.
Consistent, thank you. In that, like, don't switch it up as you're moving through. So yeah, your evidence from your first text, then you explain your evidence and how it relates to your essay prompt from the first text. Then the C stands for comparative connective, whatever you want to call it. And that's just like a really simple sentence being like, oh, in comparison to the longest memory or 7 stages of grieving, or this is similar to, or this is different to. And then your next D is evidence from your second text. So then you're bringing in evidence from your second text. And then the E after that is explaining your evidence from the second text and how it relates back to the essay prompt and how it's like either similar or different. And then obviously your L is like your linking sentence, which is basically wrapping up how the evidence and explanations from each text that you've discussed within that paragraph is either similar or different to each other in relation to the essay prompt. Cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Cool. Sorry, guys.
It's all right. And the answers I'm going to give right now are kind of going to follow that form, I suppose, where I'll talk about one text and then the other and how it's similar or different. Because the other important thing, actually, which we just forgot to mention, is that it's not enough just to have that C sentence in the middle for your comparison. You need to make sure that in the second half of your body paragraph, when you're talking about the second text, you are comparing back to the first one and being like, this is similar because of this, or this is different or unlike this, blah, blah, blah. Because at the end of the day, it's a comparative essay which you are writing. So, need to have lots of comparison.
And like to do the similarity, like the topic sentence and the middle comparative sentence is kind of talking about usually the similarities. And then you should throw in a sneaky difference like before the link sentence.
If you can, yeah. All right. Cool. So, back to the essay question, which I'll repeat because I'm sure you've all probably forgotten by now. No, that's okay. That was good. So, how is resistance portrayed in the longest memory and the 7 stages of grieving, and how is it received? So, as we already just spoke about, the key word in this would be resistance. So, I need to make sure I actually know what that means. And it's, got 2 parts to it, I suppose. So, we're looking at how it's portrayed, but also how it's received. So my 3 ideas that I kind of came up with, like, I don't know how you guys do this, but I kind of asked myself, like, what the text is trying to show about resistance. So the 3 things I came up with, which I'll dive into in a little bit more depth in a sec, I had that resistance is portrayed as dangerous.
I had that.
Good. We're on the right track. Good. Resistance is feared by oppressors. Yep, and this one was a little bit less obvious. I don't know. But anyway, the third one I had is that resistance can be passive.
Yeah, okay.
So that one, I don't know. You can let me know if I end up convincing you or not. But anyway, I'll start off with my first one. So, for my first topic sentence, I'd have something like both texts portray that resistance is that resistance is something that can be dangerous. And with that, so for the longest memory, I think there's that really obvious one where Chapel is trying to resist being a slave and part of that system, and that ultimately he's punished with death for that. So through his resistance, he kind of pays the ultimate price, which is death, and that kind of shows how it's dangerous, obviously. And then within the 7 stages of grieving, what I thought was a similar link was Daniel Yock, of course, who resisted arrest by the police. It said that he ran but was intercepted. And this is, again, something that ultimately resulted in his death. Another example I had from the 7 stages of grieving too is the woman's brother too, because he obviously showed resistance by standing up to the police who were racially discriminating against his friend. There's that quote where he thought that this fella's done nothing wrong, and he pushed the police officer, and while it didn't result in his death, it resulted in him becoming dependent and embarrassed because of the charges and fines he received, and it started that cycle for him the woman talks about. So it's similar in the sense that resistance brought death to 2 of the individuals. It's still similar in the sense that it brought negative consequences to those who resisted their oppressors, and that even though the brother didn't actually die, like he still had his life technically, it still kind of had been taken away from him in some way, because obviously he can't live the life he was living, because now he's part of this vicious cycle of not having a job, not having money, being embarrassed by it, drinking to excess and all that sort of stuff. So that's how I would do my first body paragraph probably. Anyone want to add anything before I move on?
No, I mean, like, I've been trying to push as well, like, using some evidence in terms of, like, structural
Of course, yeah.
stuff. So, like, if you wanted to talk about, like, the symbolism of the whip, so in terms of, like, Chapel, he was resisting by wanting to be free, you could say that, like, the whip is the symbol of, like, anti-resistance, or like resistance to that, to people wanting to defy their oppressors. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And like, sorry to cut in here as well. With Prue's comment about symbolism and stuff, that always lends itself to much higher marks on your essay as well. Like, obviously using all that evidence is great, but when you start pulling in like literary techniques and devices and stuff like that, your teachers and your assessors are going to be like, oh my god, tick tick tick. Like, I know that I get very excited.
Amazing.
When you pull in like those symbols that are shown in the text, and then compare them. Like, you could even compare it back to another symbol that's shown in the 7 stages of grieving about resistance and change and all that stuff as well. But yeah, sorry to interrupt.
No, all good. All right. So the second paragraph I would write would be something like, both texts display that resistance is something that is feared by oppressors. Through that, obviously, I'd be addressing like the second part to that essay question about how it's received. And from the longest memory, we hear a lot from the plantation owners about how obviously they don't want things to change, and then also how they try to rule with fear to prevent any sort of resistance or uprisings. So I think, there's a quote where they describe how a massive slave revolt will bring us all grief. And then when they're talking about Chapel being whipped to death, they say, slaves will see this as a warning that they can't run. So they're really fearful that the slaves will resist them and revolt, or there'll be some sort of uprising. And then you could also bring in how they try to rule with fear to prevent that from happening. And then the 7 stages of grieving, it was kind of hard, or not, it was more tricky to think about this one in terms of how people, oppressors, I suppose, perceive resistance. But the thing that stuck out for me was mainly that example, or that scene, of the march, where there's that peaceful march at Musgrave Park, where they're all just silently marching for the loss of Daniel York, but the media headlines describe it as defiant and traffic stopping and everything. So it's still, I thought you could kind of say that it still does show that how they fear the resistance of minority groups, no matter how it's actually executed. And so the similarities that I would draw from this one is that, like, it's similar in the sense that obviously both forms of resistance cause fear, but different in the sense that plantation owners and overseers can blatantly, like, punish slaves by law, whereas the situation in Australia is a little bit different. They can't just, blatantly walk to the march and start, like, doing awful stuff to these people unless there's some sort of provocation for it.
Absolutely. Love it.
Cool. Good.
And then and then last one, this is the one that was tricky. I feel like a lot of the time, I know myself, if I'm looking at essays, like, I usually have 2 really solid ideas, but then it's always that third one that is just a little bit challenging to
bit of a
get.
straw man.
Yes. So what I'm going with for this one, though, you can you might have stuff to add to it or to argue with me about, but I also thought I would have my third paragraph as something like, both texts portray resistance as something that can be passive. And for that, I would refer to like Chapel learning to read as a form of passive resistance, where obviously, like, he's not allowed to, but he does anyway, but, like, no one really knows about it, so it's not causing any real trouble that anyone's aware of. And same with Cook encouraging Chapel to read and to also still see Lydia. So I think both of those things, yeah. And then
I love it.
Yeah.
and then moving on to the 7 stages of grieving. Again, the first thing that came to mind was the peaceful protest, but because I would have already talked about that in my second paragraph, I don't want to be getting too repetitive. I don't want to be limiting the amount of knowledge that I'm showing about this text, so I had to kind of dig a bit deeper. And that's where I kind of thought that you could talk about the mockery of reconciliation and how they call that, reconciliation, and they just don't take that seriously. They don't really accept that as a thing that's, there to help them. And I also thought that you could maybe talk about, like, the grandmother not being trustful of the government or being able to trust doctors or teachers or police and that sort of thing, maybe. What do you guys think?
Or what about like her, like the stand-up? It's one of my favorite scenes, I think, her stand-up comedy routine, and like how she's kind of resisting that discrimination, but not actively to their face, but as just as, because she's using comedy, she's resisting it. She's not accepting what they're saying.
Yeah, and that all the quotes about, like, I'm still black, I'm still deadly, like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, good one. I hadn't even thought of that. But anyway, the similarities that I would talk about are that, like, they're both resisting their oppressors, but at the same time it's different because Chapel gains something out of his education, whereas in the other instances they kind of, like, for the grandmother, like, she loses the benefits associated with doctors, teachers, police, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, that's kind of what I came up with for that.
Cool.
I like it. Good job.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I had very similar ideas. The only thing my last one would have been like resistance is imperative for change, and how these characters had to resist to change the social beliefs, or like we could see in Whitechapel, how he, the fact that he's so passive to his enslavement or accepting wouldn't result in change, whereas someone like Chapel or Lydia, to resist, even though it like ended in tragedy, it's kind of like, well, it may have started something.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah. And even in 7 stages, we see these marches, so they're walking across the bridge and march, the scene march. I think though that it's really, we see how important those sort of stuff is to change society's like ideas and values.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So how important it is to resist oppression and fight back in a way.
I like yours better than mine.
Can I be super depresso? I would have like the same, but then I would also have because I imagine this question could be like, oh, do you agree, or to what extent do you agree? I would make one of my paragraphs about like, oh, resistance is futile, and within the texts, and then sorry, I'm just like thinking about this off the top of my head. I would say the fact that resistance is futile and it's portrayed like this and it's received like this, and my evidence for longest memory would obviously be Chapel's death. I would also discuss Cook's rape. I would also discuss the fact that Lydia she doesn't really get taken seriously. I would also talk about the Virginian editor to some extent as well, and then I would compare that back with how resistance can be shown to be futile within the 7 stages of grieving, with obviously the Daniel Yock story, the brother story, the father story, all of these terrible things that are happening to these people of colour within these stories, and how, in fact, their story does not end happily.
Yeah.
Am I totally wrong?
No, not at all.
No.
Okay.
You definitely argue that. Yeah.
I would talk about that as well. But I like your answers too, guys.
No, it's good. All of our brains obviously work very differently, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, there, as long as you can kind of back up your point with the evidence, you can kind of not almost say whatever you want, but basically
you can angle it
and
whatever way you want.
and there's no, there's no only 3 answers. Like, it's not like we're sitting down and being like, these are the 3 answers we're looking for. There's numerous, and it depends on how you've read it or the evidence that you pick.
Yeah.
And how you present your arguments, and no, I like it. Teaching English is fun. Cool.
All right, moving on to the next prompt that we're going to discuss. My prompt for everyone is, or essay question, compare the ways in which the 2 texts explore the possibility of social change. What did you have, guys?
The first idea that came out for me was the hopefulness of the youth and the young characters in the text.
Good one.
In comparison to the old character or the older characters.
I love that. I didn't have that at all, but I love that so much.
Didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like youth. Yeah, like what?
So we see this, especially we definitely see it in The Longest Memory in terms of Chapel and Lydia. There's just so hopeful for social change. They fight for social change. It's like we can see how these ideas kind of overlap in terms of even the last prompt. But we see how these young characters expect social change, and they will do not almost anything. But in terms of The Longest Memory, especially Chapel putting his life on the line for social change, and Lydia fighting even after Chapel's death, speaking out in the Virginian Editor. We see this expectation that social values are going to change. And in the 7 stages, it's the woman, and she's even just the act of, I think, having it saying and talking to us about it, I feel like is that expectation. She's telling us that we need to change. And then the scenes, once again, like the march, the walking across the bridge, she's expecting social change. She's a lot more, you could say she's a lot more hopeful than her nana, in a sense. Yeah,
I'd agree. What else did you have?
I had, we see the change in attitudes of the oppressive systems as well. So even throughout these texts, we can see difference in the oppressive systems. Does that make sense? So we see
how they've changed over time.
Yeah. So in The Longest Memory, we've got that comparison or contrasting difference of Mr. Whitechapel. So the fact that Mr. Whitechapel's character is even there suggests that society is changing, and his values and his attitudes towards slavery is change, or it's different to the other plantation owners and the Virginian editor. So we can, I think from his character, we can see that society is starting to change. And even from the North, where I think the North is kind of presented as this kind of like utopia in a sense. And I think just so then even the geographical locations presents that like these systems are changing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's sorry to interrupt, there's just a really good quote which I had written down for something I was going to talk about, which is in the Virginian Editor, or which is by the Virginian Editor, sorry. And it's something like, the world is changing rapidly, and that like slavery, it's the changes, it's not going to happen in our lifetime nor that of our children, but it's suggested that it is going to change at some point. Yeah.
So maybe it's slow, but it's changing.
Yeah.
And then the 7 stages, I think we see that because of the time frame. We see how like the difference between invasion poem and how these systems treated Indigenous people, and then the change to reconciliation and walking across the bridge. We see this kind of change in this system, this oppressive system. We see change in that. So the oppressors, we see change in the oppressors themselves. And and how social values can change over time. Slow, albeit slow, but it does change, or it is changing. Yeah. I think that's what I was trying to get at. Does that make sense? I don't know if I waffled. Yeah.
No, yeah, definitely did.
Makes sense. Absolutely.
Yeah, perfect. And then I don't know if this one's a stretch, but I think these texts, in a way, they provide a voice to the voiceless. So the fact that like we're giving these perspectives of people who are discriminated against or marginalized, these texts just give us insight, give us perspective of this. So we hear from like Indigenous people, we hear from enslaved people, we even hear from women. So I think just the text themselves gives a voice to these people.
I really like that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I think that was really good.
And you'd
that
be able
whole
to obviously
paragraph.
use.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I was just gonna say you'd obviously be able to. Yeah, I think you're about to say you'd be able to use it. Use a lot about like the structure and the voices
Yeah.
and like all that sort of stuff as your evidence, which
Yeah.
would be really good.
So that would be mainly, structural techniques. And I would kind of show off there about my knowledge of structural techniques and how, and, author's intention and stuff. So, yeah, definitely I would flex there.
Love it. We have had two really different essays. All of my topics are like different to yours for this one. But I think yours are better. Anyway, I had both texts suggest that social change is not something that can happen quickly. I would have also talked about how both texts suggest that striving for social change can bring about someone's downfall.
Oh, yes. Love that one. Sorry.
And then the last one I would have talked about was that both of them suggest that there's hope for social change.
Yeah. You could almost even replace the word social change with resistance, and it's almost the same as the first prompt. Like, yeah. Funny. Anyway, I just noticed that.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, so good. I have nothing to add.
All right, we'll move on then.
I'm sorry.
Well, you can just talk about this one then, because this is your own question, so hopefully you've thought about it.
No, I haven't thought about it at all. I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, so my question was, in those suitcases lies the photos of those who are dead, those nameless ones, ... And that's a quote from the seven stages of grieving. And then the next one is, the future is just more of the past waiting to happen, which is obviously from The Longest Memory. And then my question was, compare the role of memory of the two texts and how grief is portrayed within them. So when I'm thinking about this essay, or planning out this essay, the first thing I would obviously talk about is how retrospective each of the texts are. So obviously, throughout the text, you have the Aboriginal woman, who's obviously carrying the suitcase, which is full of these family photos and all this red earth. And then she is talking about how basically it's how important it is to keep that memory alive and that tradition alive, and also by that same double-edged sword, how painful it is to remember them. Does that make sense? Am I making sense? I always feel like I never make sense.
No, you're not really. No, you are. You're fine.
I was like, no, oh my god.
No.
Yeah, so that retrospective sort of memory, thinking back, being wanting to remember then, but then also not, because it's so painful. So I'd use sort of those kind of quotes to sort of start discussing how obviously the Aboriginal woman is pained in the 7 stages of grieving, and then I would compare that back to obviously Whitechapel, who is basically he's basically a living, walking giant memory. Because his life, I think he says, and I think we talked about this in other podcasts, how his life is the longest memory, and it is the most painful memory. I remember making a point about that. So then obviously I'd have him, I'd find quotes about how Chapel is past, and I think I wrote one down and I said he's tired of trying not to see. So how memory can really affect him and be really painful. Does that make sense? Yes.
Yeah.
No. Yes. Perfect. Great. Love it. I would obviously, so I would choose those sort of two characters to discuss how painful memory can be, but it needs to be enacted in order to preserve like tradition and stuff like that. Cool. My next point would probably obviously be like I would say the very this is really lame, the very fabric of cultural history and how it's sort of been woven into the two texts, so more like collective memory, so and how that obviously is still painful for people to remember and stuff like that. So I would talk about the collective memory of slavery and how it distorts the history of culture and family alike. And then there's a quote here, what began as a single thread has woven itself into this, carpet that cannot be unwoven. So talking about obviously how, intergenerational slavery has affected African Americans. And then I would talk about, obviously, because it's really interesting, because even though Mr. Whitechapel is an incredibly problematic character, he notes, a lot of really interesting points about intergenerational slavery as well, which is really, really interesting. I always thought that was good. And then, obviously, I would use 7 Stages of Grieving to also talk about, these persistent memories of, like slavery within the Indigenous culture. And I would talk about, and one of my favourite quotes as well is like in Nana's story, she says, stories of our traditions, our heritage, who I am, it's all gone. And then, so I would also talk about the implications of missing memories and the implications of collective memories as a whole, and like losing that, and then losing that history and culture and stuff like that. Cool. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love it. So then I would also, this is, I don't know, so I'm kind of, so do you guys ever, like, you have like 2 really good points at the start? So I've got obviously like singular memory, and then I have collective memory, and then how that grief is kind of shared. And then my third point is like a little bit straw manny. I'm really sorry.
That's exactly what Emily said, though.
Yeah.
So then I would hold on. Sorry, let me just grab my notes. Yeah. So then I would. Oh, this is really. It's a shitty. I'm not happy with this.
Okay.
So just tear me apart. So the last thing I would talk about is like suppression of memory, and like the whites trying to suppress the culture and the history and the traditions, and retelling these obviously terrible things that have happened to these people. Like, so for example, I would discuss within 7 Stages of Grieving, I would obviously discuss the genocide, like history of Australia. There's a quote here I've got that says, Aboriginal expression has been silenced, been told not to speak, told not what to do, all that sort of stuff. So I would talk about how the white, Australia has suppressed that memory, and that culture and that history. I would refer, so some like quick scenes that I also thought about as well was the story of the brother, where he obviously went out all night, and he got pissed in order to cope with, how his life is ending up. And so that's how I would sort of respond to the second part of that answer as well, because then it's like, oh, how is that grief? How is that shown? And I'd say, oh, well, it's affected obviously the brother because of, that suppression, that oppression by, whites have affected him that way, and he's, fallen into this cycle of grief and alcoholism and all that sort of stuff. I would also talk about, Auntie Grace moving away. I find that's quite interesting as well to talk about when you're discussing like suppression and stuff like that. And then obviously I would, compare this back to, the fact that before marrying Whitechapel, Cook is raped by Sanders Sr. There's a ton of quotes about that as well. Like, after he laid out his hands on me, I wanted to die. I remember the first time I read that book, that was the first quote that really got me. And so then again, there's more suppression. Obviously, you know, raping somebody, like, you're showing a great deal of power over them. And like, there's very little justice that's ever really shown, like, through that. Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, like trying to cover it up.
Yeah. And then I would say, like, you know, the painful, you know, nature of memories and all that sort of stuff. So I would discuss, you know, the fact that Cook was suppressed. Like, she never really, you know, got to have any like retribution for him. You know, like the fact that Auntie Grace moved away, the fact that, you know, the brother obviously was not happy and fell into that, you know, cycle of alcoholism and abuse and all that sort of stuff. So I'd kind of acknowledge, the suppression as well. But yeah, I don't know. I don't like that argument, but I like my other two arguments a lot better. That's how I tackle that essay question. Yay!
No, I think with your last point, you like justified it well.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think, it's I found it a difficult question as well. So I don't know.
Yeah,
what did you guys have?
I found it difficult because it was kind of like asking you to talk about kind of two themes, like both memory and grief, which are like closely linked. But yeah, some of mine were kind of similar to yours. I had that, like, so they suggest that memories are painful and can cause us grief. That's obvious. Also that's grief is an ongoing process, which is different for everyone. And then I would have brought in a lot of structural stuff for that one. And then the last one, which was my stretch probably, was where I said, they suggest that memories and grief from the past can prevent individuals from having hope.
Ooh, okay.
That's so interesting, like, that those are your answers. Like, because mine are totally different to yours. Like, mine are all about singular memory and collective memory and cultural memory and all that sort of stuff. And
I think just by hearing, like, your, like, the ideas you've thought out for your one, yours sounds like it would be a more sophisticated essay than mine. So
it was just me being like, oh, okay, shit, what am I gonna do? No. What did you have, Prue?
I had, like, I feel like mine, they're all very similar, but my first one was memory of the past allows us to better understand the present and the future. And then my next point was memory, and my last two are probably quite similar. So second is memory is sometimes painful, but an important part of grieving. And the third one is memory allows us to heal from past traumas.
I like that one.
I like it.
Yeah, I like to end on, like, a little hopeful, like, a little positive note. Like, you know, being like, you know, your first two can be quite depressing and, like, and then the last one. But, however, they also present this
hope. Oh my god, I love it. I always get kids asking me, like, "Well, Muse, why do we always do, like, really depressing texts in, like, year 11 and year 12?" And I'm like, because there is more to talk about.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I think it's really cool too that we can kind of be like blending a bit of like history into English, and people, or like our students, are obviously like getting to gain some new knowledge about like important things that have happened throughout time as well. So yeah, even though it's depressing to read and write about, it's important.
It's very important. Yeah. It's very, very important.
Cool. Yeah. Well, on to our final segment for this final episode of our season. Cry. Crying face.
It's very bittersweet.
Yeah. Sian is going to run a special This Is Lit edition of Who Said That. So, Sian, can you explain what this entails, please?
All right.
I'm scared.
No, it's fine. All right, so I have this morning and a little bit of last night when I obviously thought of this amazing idea. I re-listened to like little snippets of all our episodes over this season, so the last 7 episodes, and I've compiled a list of quotes that any of us have said during the course of this season. I'm going to say the quote, and you guys have to guess who said it. These quotes are hilarious. Well, I think they're hilarious because they just show how unprofessional we really are.
Great, can't wait.
Yeah,
There's a reason why I don't re-listen to the podcast, Sean.
Well, I'm going to recreate it.
Great.
And so what you have to do is I'm going to say the quote and I'm going to try to do it in the style that it was originally delivered. You're welcome, everybody. And then you have to say your name, and that's your buzzer, and then you have to guess who it was. Extra points for those if you can guess like which episode it might be from. So, is it from our first episode, or is it from our characters episode of The Longest Memory, or is it from like our themes episode of like 7 Stages of Grieving? So yeah.
Okay, got it.
Does this make sense?
Yes,
it makes
does.
a lot of sense. Yeah.
Great. I'm so glad that I make sense. All right. So your first quote is this. I'll try to deliver it in the style that I listened to it in. Whitechapel is like totally a really bad person on the aisle seat.
Emily?
Yes.
I feel like, was it me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah. And which do you have like for an extra point? Do you know what episode that's from?
I'm guessing it was our first episode.
Correct. You get 2 points. Well done.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I had no
And,
idea.
and because thinking back on that, I was like, hang on, but he's really respectful, so he probably wouldn't be that bad. Like,
yeah.
It was more because he'd probably just want to go to sleep. Actually, no, that was the justification. Because, like, obviously by the end, he just wants to, like, you know, sleep and be dead, essentially. So if he was just like that person that's always asleep on the aisle seat, that would be annoying.
Oh,
yeah, and then I made a comment about how he would like wear one of those like eye masks, or like a sign that would be like, "Please wake me up for food."
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think I was there.
You sound like one of our students.
Shots fired. All right.
Sorry, guys, if you're listening.
All one of you. All right. So the next quote is this. Sean, can I also buzz in? The title is The 7 Stages of Grieving.
Yep.
Yep.
It's Emily.
Correct.
Yeah, that was me.
Yeah, you're so sassy to me. Like when I was like,
I know. I would never say that.
Just not on a recording.
All right. When did we? Okay. It's gonna. I'm definitely not looking at my notes here. Is it episode 3? No, 4. Episode 4.
Correct. Episode 4.
Nice.
Okay,
it's important though, you know, you've got to get the name right.
God.
My comment stands.
And do you know I've actually now been like correcting that and being like putting in the like
Same.
Improving your teaching, guys.
Yeah.
Well done. I'm so proud of you. Alrighty. The next quote is this. I have tons, by the way. We can stop at any time. I made 12 quotes for this.
Oh, me, Prue.
Yeah.
It's me.
Yes, correct. What episode?
Thinking off the top of my head, not looking at my notes. Is it episode 5?
Yes. Excellent.
Yeah, it's episode 5. Perfect.
Was that about the game?
Mm-hmm.
Was that about
That
the
was
game?
the bingo.
Yeah, that was the
sorry.
bingo. But listening back was hilarious because you're like, I think we did it in like 3 quotes or something, and then it was like, oh, Emily won, and then like we're like, okay, miss, we're done now, and you're just like, I made 12 quotes of this. Like I spent so long on this, and we were like, ha 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 ha, bye.
Well.
All right. Next one. Game on, Mole.
You, Emily, Sean.
Yes, correct. It was me.
Yeah.
Do you know what episode it's from?
I think it was the same one, wasn't it?
Yeah, was it 5?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Good old Kath and Kim reference.
Yes.
You.
Love it.
Do you know, I always thought that was a My Kitchen Rules reference. So yeah.
Wow.
Sorry, Isn't that terrible?
All right. The next one. Did I really want to answer this? No.
Emily?
Yes.
Prue?
Incorrect.
Ooh. Does it go over to Prue now then?
Yeah, Prue.
Okay,
Would you like
Prue.
to?
Emily.
Yes, correct. Do you know what episode?
Oh, Stab in the Dark, episode 7.
Incorrect.
6.
Correct.
Oh, what a good guess.
All right, so Prue. Okay, so we'll actually probably play this to the end. If Prue gets this next one, then she wins.
Oh, okay.
Nah, all right. Well, Emily, just get it. Are you ready?
Yep.
Sure.
Yes, girls, fight for my approval.
Emily.
Prue.
Emily, yes.
Oh,
Prue.
okay, fine. No,
incorrect. That's disappointing me. Prue, you automatically.
It definitely wasn't.
Aww.
Oh, it was. Huh?
Prue,
What?
you can answer. Prue.
Oh, okay. Approval. That was Shan.
Correct.
Yeah.
I thought it was Shan that had to earn our approval, though.
Yeah, I know. I don't know.
So I think it's from
Plot hole.
It's a plot hole in our
That's
thing.
why I was confused. I was like, hang on, but
Hang on a second.
I didn't care about Shan's approval.
That's so rude. It's from I think I wrote episode 5/6, so I don't actually even know what episode it's from. But it's when I think the last time I had a game and we would play. It's like the Uber Eats, and I was like, who gets the Uber Eats? And I was like, yeah, it's 5 for my approval. Yeah, cool. All right, I have one left. Do you want to do it anyway?
Why not?
I've exhausted myself from my excellent analysis from my first answer.
Prue.
Finn.
Yeah.
Yes, Prue.
That was me. Yeah.
Correct. Yes, it's from our last episode. Very good. Very good.
Yeah,
Excellent.
we don't have to talk about that.
I loved it. I was listening back this morning and I was like, wow, she's floundering.
Wow, yeah. Put a bit of a syrup on it because I was waffling.
I love it. That is all. That is our our special edition of Who Said That? This is lit. Prue, you win.
Yay!
Yay,
I'm the winner.
Nice.
Cool.
Alrighty.
Well, yeah, that wraps up episode 8 and our whole season of our The Longest Memory and the 7 Stages of Grieving study. So thank you so much for listening, guys. Truly appreciate you tuning in and listening to what we have to ramble on about. Hopefully you have learnt something from at least one of these episodes. That was our overall aim.
It's one thing, anything.
Yeah.
Just if you get one thing out of it, then I'm happy.
So thanks again. Who knows, in the future there might be another season on a different set of texts. We will just have to see what the future holds for This Is Lit. But thanks so much, guys. Good luck with your SACs and your exams if you are sitting exams for for Year 12 English this year. And we may see you again in the future. See ya.
Yeah. Been a pleasure, guys.
Good luck.
Bye.
Bye. See you. Bye.